Thank you all for your time. Just started recording. So thank you guys for your time. So uh, so myself, Charlie, and Nori from our end have chosen to sort of team up and be the facilitators. And from my end, I had informed the team that I'm actually currently on a Euro trip and I'm back to my base in Dubai as of tomorrow. And that's where I'll be, have a lot more time to dedicate. So currently I'm just, whenever I'm connected, I'm trying to just keep up. And I was hoping it's great that we're all on the call today to sort of give updates from our end, ensure everyone's on the same sort of page, and so that we agree on an action plan moving forward. So that's from my end. Honestly, I haven't been able to keep up to date because I haven't had much time and I'm not connected. I'm hoping to really get up to speed as of the next few days when I'm back. From there, I'd love to pass it to you guys. Maybe each from your end would give an update and we can all agree on how are we going to proceed and action points moving forward.
I guess I could jump in really quick. I threw an agenda together here, just kind of based on the templates that we've been using for other groups, and it's loosely based on a sociocratic method. So just if you've never seen that kind of agenda before, the check-in is really just a time to go around and check in with everybody to see where everyone's at. So you kind of allows us to gauge the room and where people are at and how they're feeling. So from that, I kind of gathered that most people are pretty excited and happy to be here. Felix seems to be a little down today, not doing any great. We haven't checked in with Alice or Stephen yet, so maybe that'd be a good thing to do right after this. And then also just a note to start recording, because in a lot of meetings I'm in, we forget to do that. So
I am recording as we speak.
And then the administrative is really any announcements. And then the accept proposed content agenda is really the content agenda, the agenda for the meeting, and it just makes sure that everyone here is happy to accept that as the agenda. Or if you want to add or subtract anything from there. So it's a time to adjust the meeting before it starts. And then I just threw in contact info for meeting invites. I find it really helpful to have this in my calendar. So if you are the same, please add your email address here, and then we can add you to the meeting invites. Yeah, Stephen's the only one that isn't there yet. So thanks everybody for filling that in. And
I'll just add mine now, Laurie.
Okay, thank you. So for me, the one thing that has come up is, yeah, I just kind of laid this out. So I'd love to discuss with everybody what methods we want to use and how we want to run the meetings and things like that. Just looking back at previous circle stuff, it kind of started with sociocracy, but perhaps the moderator wasn't the best fit for that group, and it seemed to be a little stiff and unnatural. So that's something I think we should be aware of, as to how to encourage the human conversation interaction without letting the process kind of dictate and make it too mechanical. So yeah, that's me.
This one very
here you're
short
talking
thing.
specifically about the meeting number 5, the last one where there was some friction.
No, meeting 4 and 5 were run by Victor, and from all reports, those meetings went a lot better as far as process goes and facilitation. So that was kind of my comment. And then the first 3 were moderated by John Buck, and a lot of people had feedback that it wasn't as smooth or natural, or it didn't feel productive, and people got frustrated with the process. So yeah.
One very short note is that we don't want to run the catalyst circle on sociocratic principles, neither on meritocratic, neither on holocratic. The goal is really to figure out something new. So it's great to have inputs from different whatnot critics, but we absolutely not want to become only sociocratic. That's a very clear point of view from everyone, I think, in the circle. Sorry.
That's great,
I-
Felix. Yeah,
So,
go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I'd say from a secretary point of view, I'm not going to speak for everyone. I'm speaking for myself. I would agree with Felix there in terms of being open to all approaches, but not letting any one approach become the method. Personally, I have issues with sociocracy, but and I'm critical of their approach. But I think everyone should listen to all approaches and keep an open mind. So I welcome all contributions. So that's my view.
What can you be more specific, Stephen, or explicit? Is in specifically, I mean, I guess I'm asking not in general, but maybe if you can keep it to as it relates to.
Yeah, very briefly, it comes from direct experience because I've been tracking circles since the beginning and looking at the recordings and the style and the approach of sociocratic practitioners, what they say and what they do may be two different things. And I found very process-led at the expense of human interaction, of discovery. My background is much more from peer facilitation, which is actually a process of discovery of how people are as you find them. Okay. Whereas sociocratic approach seems to be very much more prescriptive than that. It comes with a method which they want to apply. And if that method doesn't fit with the group, then that can cause issues. And that's my impression. And I do stress that this is my impression, my opinion. Other people might have different opinions. So, you know, that's what I would say.
Guys, just from your perspective, because obviously I haven't been able to attend any of them yet, and I'm hoping moving forward I will. So what is, from your perspective, what is the main issue we're facing in terms of the main friction point? Like, why are we facing any difficulty? Why is it not going smooth from your perspective? And then maybe we can work backwards and say, if this is the issue, then how can we solve it?
From my perspective, there's a very simple infrastructure issue. And I'd say with Nori's, and that's to separate out documents for individual things. So a document for an agenda and a document for a minute. So I'd say that composite meeting documents, Nori, I can understand why people do that, but that's awkward from a tracking perspective. So if we can keep documents like particularly with, it doesn't matter so much maybe with our own meetings, but it's critical with circle meetings that there's an agenda document that is separate for each agenda, for each bi-weekly, and there's a separate document for the minutes. The reason for that is it just makes tracking a lot easier. And it's very simple. And this is not all the issues. This is just one of the issues that cause problems for meetings 3 and 4 in terms of documenting and tracking. It basically meant I couldn't track 3 and 4. But with 5, when I was in control of doing the documentation of that, I was easily able to import all that into a Git book. And I explained, I don't want to go into too much in this meeting of how that process, I probably should do a proper presentation of all that. But that allows us to document individual agenda items easily and to reference individual agenda items easily. And then going on from that, once we're able to do that, we're able to follow up on them, which is the problem that, well, one of the problems of Circle Meeting 5 was, well, there was the issue of people having ownership of issues, but then there's going to be how the facilitator follows up on that, how the facilitator knows what to chase, what action items to chase. And that is partly having the information at their hands. And that's my role as the secretary. I don't want to become involved in facilitation issues particularly. I just want to provide the facilitator with the information that they need to chase the issues that they need. And I think that's the secretary's role.
Stephen, that's great. Just building on your point, because that so the output of each sort of meeting is going to be the minutes of the meeting after it, you're saying, and the agenda would be before. So Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the agenda, so each meeting will have its minutes, which will be the product of that meeting, if you like.
Okay.
And
Can
that will, go on.
That's awesome. Can I suggest, because that's what we used to do in my previous professional sort of work, where I, just FYI, I had resigned and just recently.
Congrats.
So what we used to do for important meetings is there would be a minutes of meeting summarizing what was agreed on, and then another, whether it's in the same document or a separate document, of clear action points. And we can even attach to it like a RACI model, what we call a RACI model, which is each of these letters represent a word. So RACI is who is responsible, A is accountable, C is consulted, I is informed. So it will be clear that each item, could be even just a simple sort of just table. So that's the minutes of the meeting in terms, if you want to know what was discussed and agreed on. And these are the action points. And the action points, it's clear who needs to do what by which date. If we can then come out with these two documents, because I also sense what you're saying is very true, because I watched quickly the last meeting, number 5, and it seemed like there was a sort of expectation mismanagement. I was supposed to do this. I thought he was going to do this. So if we could come out with a document that has that RACI model or any other model that we can come up with, I'm just familiar with it because that's what we used to use. That would clearly lay out who needs to do what and by when. And then we reach that next meeting, it should be clear. At least it won't be perfect, but it would minimize that sort of scenarios that we saw in meeting 5.
And indeed, I think they're halfway there, because the template that they already use already divides agenda items into problems, which have a status on a Trello board. What they don't have at the moment is an action status, as you say, which we need to bring to that. Felix has probably got something more to say about this.
I see one risk point there to create really this action item list. And the problem, especially in the last meeting, was not specially about, okay, for example, not aligned or whatnot. It was much more really pointing that we don't have the time to to follow up on all the action items. There is far too much pressure and too much responsibilities on the circle members to handle all this. And we need to find sources to outsource processes, works. And I think there is a very important step also from the facilitator and the secretary, so the admin team, that we know, hey, we have some support there, because we don't arrive to do all the stuff. And it becomes very stressful and the motivation goes down, and sustainability is definitely risked, yes.
Yeah, great point. What I would maybe also, one other thing while you're speaking, that totally makes sense. Maybe a role that we could play, whether the facilitator or the secretary, leading up to the meeting, maybe a day or two before, maybe we should touch base with each of the circle members to say, guys, the expectation is that you're going to present this, this, and that. Are you guys good? Everything is fine. Any issues that we need to be aware of ahead of the meeting, so that we go into the meeting, at least as facilitators and secretaries, knowing what to expect. And we start off the meeting saying, this is, we've touched base with everyone, and this is what we're going to talk about today, or this is the expectation. Maybe there's a role for us to play there, leading up to the meeting a day or two before, sort of catching up with everyone, ensuring that the expectations are aligned. Nori, yeah, please go ahead.
Charlie had his hand up first. You can go, and I'll go after you.
Sorry, yeah. Charlie, please go ahead.
It's all good. Yeah, and Alice, did you actually have? I saw you do something with your hand. I don't know if you had a thought that you wanted to share as well.
I'm mostly listening. I'm still like discovering what we're doing and what's happening. I haven't watched any of the circles yet, but I am planning to on Friday.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I guess one thing I had a sort of a bigger concern coming out of the meeting 5 watch, and it's really been my intuition as I've listened to everything in the town halls around the circle, is that we do not have a clear vision, in my opinion. I'll speak for myself. I do not have a clear vision for what the circle is, what are the constraints of the circle, that is to say, what are its goals, what are its aims. And even as I sort of learned about sociocracy, sociocracy seems to work best in the companies, in environments that have adopted it, which is specifically companies like Mars, like insanely huge hierarchical structures. And the reason why sociocracy works is because you have a completely disenfranchised group of people called employees, and layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of disenfranchisement. And you are giving them sort of this platform to, number one, participate, and number two, collaborate. And they feel like they have a voice, and they do within the circle within which they are operating. But there are two things that are at play as a whole. There is sort of this way that the individual is handled, and there's also a very specific assumption around the goals that govern the entire construct, which come from the corporation. Now, when we look at Catalyst, I hear, especially in the conversations around the circle, I hear a massively agnostic goal set. In fact, looking at it's very ambiguous. And I almost think that in its current iteration, I am really, the whole construct itself doesn't really give me a lot of confidence that it's going to accomplish anything, because nothing has been defined yet specifically. Like, for instance, to facilitate communication so the four goals that Dor has reiterated, and this is from the blog that announced it, to facilitate communication between different functional groups. So I haven't listened to meetings 3 and 4, but I didn't hear a huge agenda item coming out of that, of creating, to me, that if that was truly a goal, I would sort of expect to hear some sort of tangible work being outlined from that, such as, can we create forums for where we, collect these various groups? There's not even a conversation about what is the problem. Are we having a problem with stake pool operators specifically not listening to project proposers? I've never heard that proposed as an actual problem. Maybe I've missed it. Similarly, to provide heads up when red lines are crossed within a certain group. Well, to me, there's a very discrete goal there, that work that could be done, which I have not heard defined, which is, what is a red line? I don't know what a red line is. And if that's truly a goal of the circle, then that's completely failed in its work. Then thirdly, to suggest improvements on plans and processes that shape Project Catalyst. Incredibly vague, because what does the shape of Catalyst need to look like would be the question to define. And I haven't heard anyone questioning, what is the shape of Catalyst? That would be the first order problem that, in my opinion, would need to be brought up. And then fourthly, the last one, to define the election process for Circle version 2. I've heard about funding. So to me, this is, in its current form, completely failed in its purported goal. I don't think anyone knows. And I'm being really harsh per se. I'm more optimistic than perhaps I'm sounding, but this is super ambiguous, and I'm really losing confidence that this is a conversation that people even want to have. So I'm so excited to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think you're right. There's a lot of gaps for sure, and a lot of things are not defined, but we're the first batch. So I think it's on us really to start defining all these things. And if there's one thing that really will define our success, and I believe we had mentioned it in the response that we had shared with Felix and the Circle, is I think one of our biggest roles should be to define all this ambiguity that, Charlie, you're talking about. You're absolutely right. It's all over the place. I've been following Cardano since 2017, and to me, it's still not clear. Now I'm still learning, and it's on us to really start defining all this. And what like the vision is that if we are able to transition to the next group of people in 3 months or so, and they're going to find it so much easier and seamless, then this is our criteria for success. I don't think anyone's expecting us to change the world now. I think now we should be focusing on setting the foundations, because nothing is defined. So, and to Felix's point, maybe if we don't have time, maybe we should outsource to some copywriter, and we tell them, because I don't know, I'm not a good writer, and it would be unfair for us to work on so many things and then say, yeah, you be a copywriter and an editor and all of that. I don't think it costs much. I think we can figure that out in terms of if we want to hire just a copywriter and then lay that out and start documenting everything, like literally step by step. And then the class after us, when they come in, they're like, everyone is going to be clear. Like the facilitator, this is what you need to do. This is what's expected from you. And then as secretary, each circle member, we have 3 months to do that. We probably won't do it all of it perfectly, but yeah, I would look at this as my point. Like overall, is that I would look at it as an opportunity rather than a challenge.
Just to get back to Charlie's point, we do have a town hall breakout today to talk about circle meeting number 5, but that might also be a great place to provide your feedback to the circle. I think it's a little bit outside of our group, to be honest. I think the goal for our group shouldn't be to define or shape the circle itself. We're there to help facilitate the meeting so they can do that without having to go through the minutiae of planning and recording and all that. So we're facilitators. We don't guide the vision or guide the circle in any way aside from the conversation and facilitating that back and forth. So I think that's going a little bit out of our remit to even think about those things. I think we should be able to give feedback to the circle as citizens of Cardano to say, this is what I saw, this is how I feel. And if you don't feel they're doing their job, I think that's valid. But I don't think as a group, I want to get into the shaping of the circle or its purpose, because I don't think that's our goal here. Personally, I think our goal is to facilitate the meetings, make sure they run smoothly, and make sure that that's what we're doing here, and that the secretaries record what happened and we leave a concrete history behind. And then just to get through some of the thoughts that we've talked about, for facilitator, I agree that the facilitator should be doing work prior to the meeting. We should be going through the agenda, and then for each and every agenda item, actually really thinking carefully, is this an action item that we need to drive towards, or is this an area where we need to get consent, or do we need to have a discussion, or what are the next steps? And all of those kind of things should trigger some different strategy for the facilitator to employ to get to that goal. And that should what we should be focused on. And as facilitators, we shouldn't be joining that conversation. We should be facilitating the conversation. So our mindset needs to be above the meeting, looking at it holistically and saying, here's the agenda item. Are we getting towards the goal of that agenda item? Or are we drifting? If it's drifting, let's get the conversation back on track. And that's really hard when you get into the conversation and start talking about it. So I think there's a definite facilitation skill to stay aloof kind of and not involved, because it's our nature to want to give our input and feedback, but that's not really why we're there. We're there to look at the meeting and guide it and make sure it's successful.
So yeah, and to sorry, just to respond, I didn't interrupt you there, Nori. I agree with you, and you did it well here, because we have a specific goal in this meeting, and this would be a very good case in point of what you're talking about, sort of bringing us back to, hey, let's not talk about the bigger picture here. However, being that it is an experiment, I think I would propose that the facilitation will be sort of a ground zero of finding meaning, because if Nadim notices that everyone's sort of agreeing to a point, but no one really knows what it means, as a facilitator, I would propose that it's his responsibility to call that out and say, maybe he's not the one giving the input, but he's the one that notices and then says, Dor or, Felix or whoever, please dig deeper on that because we lack clarity here. And by calling it out, there's this inevitable input that he is passively given by creating the space and creating the vacuum. Yes, it might be filled by someone else, but it's very specifically through this analysis. If he's just taking notes and going through it, he's not going to call that kind of thing out, and we're going to have a very ineffective body. So there is just to push back a little bit, yes, you can do it in a way that doesn't, like do what I'm doing, which is sharing opinions and all this, but you're still responding in kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Based on the agenda, like. I think
Alice, go ahead. You have
Yeah.
your hand raised.
Waiting patiently. I actually liked what Charlie said, though I did agree with Nori as well. I think that we can take an action item from that, maybe to add it to the next meeting agenda. Just because, like, if we have the higher vision, but it's not broken down into more specific and accurate items or goals, or like, I don't know what. Yeah, so maybe we can suggest that to the next meeting. I think I don't have access to that. I don't know where is the circles agenda itself, but yeah, if you agree with me, I would love that we suggest that, not to come with our own opinion of what it should be, but just to facilitate a conversation around it, to gather the insights of the group as to how it should look like.
I don't think I got it exactly. So what was the question that you want to discuss that you're proposing?
So we have, I think it's the vision that Charlie read. It's like the 4 items. You said
okay.
they're not specific enough. So maybe to make it more specific and not to bring our own opinion of what it should be, but to ask each team member and to facilitate a conversation around how we can make it more specific so it doesn't sound so ambiguous.
Yeah, got it. Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was taking notes, but the yes, going back to Charlie's and Nori's points, at the last meeting, there was a point where all of a sudden Dor turned to me and asked me my opinion for something, and I was taking minutes, and it kind of, oh my God, yeah, because I thought it kind of broke the fourth wall a little bit, because you're not supposed to ask the secretary for an opinion. But there again, the opinion, what Dor was asking about was the process, because they were drafting the process for the Trello board, a kind of way, or if you look at the beginning of the minutes for meeting 5, I'm kind of tabulating what they're talking about, which is like coming up with how to go across the Trello board. And Dor wanted my advice on that too, because, you know, I work with processes going across Kanban boards and stuff like that. But at the time, I wasn't prepared for that, Charlie. You know, so I was trying to kind of like taking off guard. So I kind of like didn't really respond very well, I don't think, Felix, but to that. And so I kind of like, I was a bit fluffed. But then maybe I should have been prepared. And if there was a facilitator there, maybe part of this, I get what you're saying, Charlie, about I think there is a role for a facilitator to call out ambiguities in a meeting, okay? Whoever they are, it doesn't matter who they are in the meeting, okay? If someone is talking in ambiguous terms or needs to clarify what they're saying, there comes a point, I think, where a facilitator needs to point that out and to ask, what do you mean by that, okay? Or this is not clear what you are saying, for example, to me, okay? And then but there is a kind of balance between doing that and leading the conversation. A facilitator should never really lead the conversation unless they should kind of enable the conversation, okay? So that was just what
That's great. Yeah. And by the way, your feedback was good. You were caught off guard, but I thought it was actually quite useful to the conversation. So, you know,
right.
And you can't diminish that. So good job there, by the way. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And from the sociocratic, it's interesting because we assume that these people have been legitimately elected, and they were by the 30 people who elected them. So this legitimacy that we're talking about, to my mind, is an exclusive function of productivity. There's no legitimacy to something of zero effect. It's a sort of a moot point, which is why, yes, I do, which is why I'm pushing so hard sort of for this. And again, it's something I'll bring up later. I'm curious what your thoughts are after Nori.
I was going to say the same thing. We do have a circle representative here with us, so I don't want to have this group like start stuffing things into the circle agenda, I think that's also like stepping over a line as well. But since we're double linked and we have a circle rep here, if we can appeal to Felix if he thinks that might be a good topic to have and gain some clarity, then I think that would be the appropriate route, is to kind of petition for that agenda item to be discussed by a circle member who's passionate about it.
Just 100% before we pass it off to Felix, because since Alice said that feedback, I've been thinking a lot about that, and I want to suggest, and let me know what you guys think, instead of us telling them to define what they are, maybe at least in this first session, rather than us sort of estimating or trying to figure out what they want from us, let us have this first session to say, what do you guys need from us? Where do you feel you're lacking? What are the points that you want us to come in? Now we have a full team. Now, we're here to help. What do you guys need from us? And then maybe in the next few sessions, we can say, okay, now this is what we expect from you, or you need to define yourself. But now, because some of us have not gone through any of these meetings with them, I don't know exactly what are their pain points. And now we're trying to figure out, okay, maybe they want us to do this or that. Maybe we should have the first session to say, guys, now we're a full team and we're here to help you. Tell us first, in this first session, let's spend 10 minutes to say what has been your pain points and where do you feel we could come in and add value. Just what do you guys think before we pass it off to Felix, since he's also a circle member? I think it's great to have his feedback.
Love that.
Awesome. Felix, what your thoughts?
I think the very first points, I really appreciated, Nori, what you said, that it's not because when you guys start to speak about the overall, okay, what is the definition of catalyst circle and this and that and everything, then this means nothing else that we have to create a second catalyst circle. So we have to come up with a second election for you guys, and people need to apply for it and nominate themselves. So this wouldn't be the goal. It would just create more confusion. Right now, the main things what the circle needs is already why we announced this recruitment for the circle and the facilitator, to draft agendas, to facilitate the meetings. And that's everything for the beginning, I think. And what happens later, I think this will evolve over iterations like circle itself. But I think also this group, we should be very careful of not setting the expectations quite high. And then you have expectation management to settle in the catalyst circle, between the catalyst circle members and between you guys and between the both groups. So it will become very fast, a very big mess. So the main points, what we need is that we have an agenda for this, for the next meeting on September 23rd, that we have a secretary who takes the notes there, and that we have a facilitator who is able to facilitate in the meeting. And I think now maybe the very first step also start small, step by step. This already, and then there will come the next meeting, and the next meeting we'll get in touch and learn also how to work with each other, but really stepping stones, step by step by step by step. It's something what we messed up in the catalyst circle a little bit, I think, because we had not stepping stone, we had jumping stones. And this led quite fast to a confusing situation. And now we are confronted with this huge expectations and responsibilities coming out of all these jumping stones. Another thing what I would consider to you already is where we made one mistake also with Dean and Loris, for example, that Dean, he's not familiar at all about Project Catalyst. Loris also, he's not really. And when there are some people in the circle speaking about crucial catalyst problems, it has to be assured that the whole team is up to date. So also between you, that everybody knows what is the catalyst circle, what was the beginning, how did it happen, where are they right now, why is this catalyst circle even there? So for example, I think maybe Charlie, Stephen, Nori, you are very active in Project Catalyst. I know that you can deliver directly all the answers. Alice, Nadim, is it the same for you? So
hopefully that will change over time.
Exactly. So make sure already that you are all up to date between you already. The first point also that we can start to work effectively and productive with each other.
Yeah, fully aligned. Good points, Felix.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the last town hall where we interviewed secretaries, and I think I saw that as a commitment to mentor new secretaries. You know, so the secretary is not one role, but it's a team. But having said that, there are people who are more familiar with the system, like myself, maybe Michael a little bit as well. And then, but I still committed to helping Alice and anyone else who comes along to onboard them, and to make, and also to create a knowledge base. That's partly what I want to do with my oversight Gitbook, so that we can, if there's any, and also as a team, the facilitators and secretaries, so that we can answer each other's questions and point each other into one source of information. Like Alice did, just ask where the agenda is, not that. So we need to be clear where all the where we can find all the information, you know, which can be in the Gitbook maybe, or in a website, or wherever, or in Google Documents. But you know, I would support that.
Yeah, good point. Maybe not for us to decide now. A thought that I was having while I was watching the fifth session, is that point where they Dor and another person kept going back and forth on one thing, and it just kept dragging and dragging. Maybe, and I'd love your feedback on it, maybe we don't need to sort of implement it next session, but something to consider. I was thinking at that point, maybe the facilitator should have been, guys, this is, you know, there are a lot of different opinions. What I'm suggesting is let's have 30 seconds to 1 minute from each person to say their opinion, and then we quickly vote on this issue and get it done with and move forward. So otherwise, it just kept going. Yeah, but I think, no, but you think, what do you think?
I
It was
totally
all over
agree.
the place.
When I was watching that segment, that was
Yeah.
the point where I was like, there needs to be a framework or a tool that everyone agrees upon that you can fall back on. Like, we shouldn't put it in your face and say, this is sociocracy and we're doing this, but having a tool that you can say, okay, now we need to do rounds. Every person gets to say, there's no crosstalk. And then I want to hear everyone's voices, and then get to consent or something like that is a useful tool to have in your back pocket. And just getting back to the sociocratic versus other holocratic, whatever methods, I agree that we shouldn't be putting it in your face and using the methodology as the goal. We should use it as a tool when it's needed, but really seek to encourage human interaction and communication and dialogue. But when things get heated or emotional, or there's a lot of crosstalk, then you have something to go, okay, we're going to do sociocracy right now. Everybody gets a turn. We're going to hear all the voices. We're going to get consent. Okay, now let's go back to the kind of the conversation.
Yeah. Awesome. Something to consider maybe for the second session. Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm acutely aware that this might be a conversation we need to close up soon here. We scheduled it for a half hour. I have a little bit of time, but just want to be sensitive to that. Is everyone okay? By the way, before I can share my thought, are we good? Okay. So what's sort of difficult I totally agree that would be a phenomenal solution if, that is to say, defaulting to like like these other, I don't want to say rules in a harsh way, but you know, these are the ways that we are going to interact here. We're going to share for 30 seconds or whatnot, and we're going to pursue consent. We're going to share, have everyone share and all that. That's fantastic. However, when it only really works when there are clear goals. This is why I keep harping on this particular issue, because for me, I'm sure all of us have participated in meetings where there is, if you were to look at those scenarios, divergent viewpoints come from divergent goals that are potentially inexplicit. Like inside someone, you don't always know the goals that you have. In fact, I would posit that you almost never do, really, at the deeper levels. With that said, then you'll have emotions bubbling up as those goals are either frustrated or validated. And what happens then is people begin to crosstalk because they're sort of feeling this urge to fight for something that they might not even have well defined. Now, when we, on a mechanical level, go to this rules-based sort of, hey, we're going to settle down now, take a breath, take a minute per person, all that. that doesn't guarantee by any means that people are going to coalesce around a goal unless there is a higher goal that is already defined. If you watch the TED Talk, for example, and this doesn't have to be about sociocracy at all. If you watch the TED Talk that John Buck gave, which Nora, you linked in the Telegram chat, thank you for that, by the way. He talks about the octopus being an example of this collective agency of various parts working in collaboration. They constitute one entity, that is to say an octopus. When you have a circle in a company, let's say Mars as a corporation, you have an entity that you can name, that you can quantify in terms of its goals. And those circles exist within sub-departments of sub-departments, no doubt, of that company, which have explicit hierarchical goals. And there's this sort of implicit agreement that we know what's going on. So I might have my personal goals, and I do, and everyone does. But when we have this sort of default layer, then we can mechanically say, and it'll work, hey, we're going to take a minute. And what we're going to do is recenter ourselves on this identity. That's sort of the unspoken implication of that. However, when the unspoken identity is ambiguous, then you can try, and you will. By the way, people will assent to this because we have this habit in our culture as a whole of, okay, everyone go around the room and take turns. We have this habit of submitting to that structure. But if we do that in a context that is ill-defined, then we will people will have ideas that will get lost every single time. And then outside of the circle, and see, this is where you'll have a proliferation of conversations like we are having literally right now. We are having this natural evolutionary circle develop. We have 6 people here that are going to send 2 people to sit at a table. Well, Felix is part of that as well. But this is exactly this is what happens in a circle environment. And this is sort of the intent, like that circles will develop outside of circles. But my point is that they will develop in conjunction with a vision, with a consolidated identity. We share an identity here as facilitators, as secretaries. And for me, I guess I'm a contrarian, if I'm anything, which I apologize for if it's too much. But anyway, so I'll sit back and hear you guys.
Alice had her hand up for a bit. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I really liked what you said, Charlie. And for that, in the startup that I'm working at, we use this model. I just linked to it. And about what Nadim said before, yeah, like also just to mention that there's the vision and the alignment that Charlie is speaking about, but also I just want to add another perspective that sometimes it's more about the emotional side. I feel like it's really important also to see if it's really like a business or a value misalignment, or it's an emotional one, because sometimes like we're not only ideas and outcomes, like we also have a very large emotional aspect to all of us. And sometimes just bringing the facilitation light into the emotions in the room and the dynamics can really like untangle things and create new dynamics, which are much more efficient and helps us get to where we want to go.
I really like that. I think emotions are important. And that's why, like, especially as facilitators, we should be looking at the room and making sure if somebody's got body language, you want to like make sure that you draw out their concerns. And often, I don't know if you've read the Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow book, but humans decide emotionally way faster than you do cognitively. And sometimes an emotion will come out and somebody will not know why they disagree emotionally. So it's really important to ask people how they feel about something and see if you can draw out the stuff. But I think we are getting long and getting way off topic a little bit. We are going to have a longer meeting on Friday, so maybe we can add some of this stuff to the agenda. But I definitely think we should figure out how to create the agenda for the next meeting before we leave quickly. If we want to do that asynchronously offline, I'm okay with that. But I think one of the goals should be coming up with a plan on how to create the agenda for the next circle meeting, because that's top of their needs. So we need to figure out a strategy for that and how we do that. And then maybe there's a little bit of technical stuff, like Stephen mentioned, agenda in one doc, notes in another, and kind of just come up with a process for that. And then maybe leave a little bit of time for this higher level philosophical conversation, because I think it's super important to figure out what we're about, and maybe we can give some suggestions to the circle about what they're about. Because I really love Simon Sinek and his Finding Your Why stuff. I run that with my teams, and it's super effective to gain that kind of thing. And I have a whole bunch to say about sociocracy and facilitation and things like that, but I don't want to extend this conversation anymore, but I'd love to continue it on Friday.
That's a beautiful note for us to end on. You said, Nori, you wanted us to work on the agenda now or work on it asynchronously? What are you recommending?
We can probably do it asynchronously, just because we have a shared Google Doc and we can see each other as we type ideas and stuff and kind of flesh it out.
Yeah.
The next day.
Cool. Let's do that. And maybe by Friday, we lock it in our next session. Perfect. Cool. Anyone else? Any last parting thoughts or comments?
I really enjoyed meeting everybody and like hearing the
Likewise.
different voices and opinions. Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, let's do this. It should be fun. Let's enjoy the ride. See you guys on Friday.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Just
Bye.
quickly, any closing thoughts from Felix as the circle person?
Would be great when we could have a very first draft of the agenda already a little bit upfront, so that circle members can review and edit if needed already. So not just 1-2 days before, because sometimes when you drop something in the Telegram channel, some of the guys, they will need it, read it maybe 2 days later. So really prepare large enough upfront time.
Can I make a suggestion in a bi-weekly cycle to start the next agenda at least a week before the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, at least. So it starts off halfway. So give us a little bit of space after the meeting, and then boom, directly on the Thursday, the facilitators and the secretary, will probably be a secretary job, and the facilitator get the ball rolling on the next agenda. So we should start this Thursday.
Maybe building on that as well, maybe separately, we should also have, secretary role and facilitator role, maybe should have I don't know whether it's a weekly or bi-weekly call us separately, maybe, in alignment heading up to each new session that we have with the circle. Maybe that's something we can agree on the Telegram group altogether. Awesome. Cool, guys. Have a good one. Take care.
Really.
See you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.